Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is episode 133, and this is our practice edition where we talk about lean improvements and tie them back to lean principles. I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and ARDA.
And I am Devin Bedoni of Lichen Precision. And our quote is, "A metaphor is a substitute for thinking because metaphors are memorable and vivid. And because they are not readily subjected to critical analysis, they can have considerable impact on human judgment, even if they can be inappropriate or even misleading. They replace genuine uncertainty with semantic ambiguity." Tversky.
Yeah, from Thinking Fast and Slow. No, I think it was from The Undoing Project, which anyone who wants to listen to these books or read them, I guess is traditional. I would definitely do The Undoing Project first. It gave me a more appreciation for the second one.
Yeah.
I think one line in there that I thought was very relevant to lean is replacing genuine uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's like, that's actually right. Like, genuine uncertainty is great.
It's critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And trying to pretend it doesn't exist. And I think often borrowing stories that feel relevant is a way of just shortcutting to like pattern matching, right? It's like,
yeah,
well, over here you see these things, and this example that I'm kind of assuming is the same in every way, or
right?
The same enough, I guess.
It allows everyone to feel comfortable with a solution based on some idea of past experience, even if that past experience is completely made up.
Yeah.
Right. Like a metaphor could be from a real example. It could just be like something someone thought of, right? Doesn't have to be real even.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, often it's not. Actually, metaphors often are not real. They're specifically idealistic. Like anecdotes are supposed to be real and sort of fall into the same category.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's super
and like
key.
Becoming more comfortable with just being like, I don't know, let's go see how it is right now.
Yeah.
Is just so much better than pontificating, even if it sounds good.
Or it's sort of like a tactic, right?
Yeah.
Using a metaphor or anecdote to get something to go a specific direction is a tactic more than an actual like sort of goal-based methodology.
Yeah, I mean, so much like, I don't know, in thinking more about kind of what is it, PDCA or whatever acronym you like, just like being methodical about problem solving is so rare. Like sometimes people give me criticism, and I don't mean like just like feedback, I guess. I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? Like specifically, like what is, not like defensively, just what is the gap that you're seeing?
Yeah. You're like, I'm
because
here to
you're already, totally. But like, you're already jumping to, well, you should change this. And I think you could change this. And it's like, well, first, like, can you explain what was not there? Or maybe like they don't have to, right? Maybe that's for me to think about.
Sure.
Like what gap is there between where we are and where we should, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It also, often that sort of feedback is very like operation focused, not necessarily. I mean, it can be valid, right?
Yeah.
They can be like, whatever, you're opening your computer slow. You could open your laptop quicker if you put your thumb here and here. And it's like, yes, that might be true, but that's like, whatever.
Yeah.
That maybe was a bad example, but that's not like that's not the key piece of me doing work faster.
There's that, and also identifying what the gap is. Like, is it speed of doing work that we're trying to solve? Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
Interesting.
A lot of stuff.
Should we jump into some improvements here?
You got a longer list, so why don't you start?
I do actually like kept my list open the last
smart
gap, so I put things in it. Also, we've been in a good groove again of starting to focus on improvements in a real concerted way.
Yeah.
I was on a plane. We took a very budget airline.
Okay.
There's like no Wi-Fi, so you couldn't watch movies on your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was no screens in the whole thing.
Didn't you say there's also no upholstery?
There was also there was upholstery on the front side of the seat. So like, but no upholstery on the back side of the seat, where typically there is at least some kind of upholstery or covering. It was literally just like the frame of the exposed frame of the seat. Yeah. My wife and I were both on the plane with our kid was at home, and I was like, I really hope we don't both die and leave our child without parents.
But the savings were good.
Yeah. They weren't even that good. Anyhow, so I was stuck with my brain. So I just started making notes on my phone and started a programming feed speeds cheat sheet.
Oh, cool.
Knowledge base sort of like dump, trying to get all the stuff out of my brain that is there from a bunch of years of doing this, because Will is now starting to take on a not insignificant amount of programming.
Wow.
Which is very
awesome.
cool. But he has zero background as a machinist. So all of the things that like I learned as a manual machinist, sort of like getting a feel for it, do not apply.
I burnt up some, I think I was mentioning high-speed steel drill bits in steel to the point where I just gave up on machining the steel because I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then sometime later I went back and looked at my SFMs and they were like 500 or I forget, just like, a lot of heat.
Yeah, as an aside, today I had a weird thing where we were blowing up turning inserts on our M300.
Huh.
And it was an interrupted cut. Okay. So I was like blaming it on the interrupted cut. But I was looking at it, I was like, this is gnarly, like not normal. And so I started digging into the code, and then I watched it run, and I was like, that is running at max speed, like absolute max speed that it's capable of. Like, what is going on here? And it turned out there was an issue in the code where it was like, there's usually like a clamp maximum speed for constant surface speed turning.
Okay.
But it turns out there's also a clamp minimum, and they were set to the same number.
Oh.
So it was just like, go at maximum speed. Do not go slower. Do not go faster.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of wild.
And so just high SFM.
High SFM. Just pulverizing.
Okay. That's very cool. And are you dividing that out by materials?
Yes. How to format it was actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like breaking it out.
I guess my material makes a lot of sense because you're like, well, what material am I programming would be a nice hard sort right off the bat because you're not doing multiple materials.
I broke it out by initially. So for now, the way it's broken out is by strategy. So whether you're like peripheral milling, slot milling, drilling, tapping, and then within that, I break it down by material type.
Gotcha. Nice. Let's see. Put more stuff into Arda. A lot more stuff, which every time I'm like, okay, we have everything in there. Then we start pulling more stuff out and it's like, oh, that is critical. So like did a few more, production cutting tools that for some reason I thought were in there. They weren't, there was no card for them.
Oh, wow.
Also we like on wholesale orders, like for retail stores, we have stickers that go on them. The stickers weren't Kanban. We produced them. Yeah. And so in some way, like it's easy to get lazy with internal production. Yeah. But then what happens is Sam will be like, oh, hey, like we're out of stickers again. And for whatever dumb reason that I should probably dig into, if I print them off of a PC, they're blurry. And if I print them off of a Mac, they're really crisp. And so it's only my laptop that we can print from. Yeah. And so it just disrupts everyone needlessly. Because instead now we can just have them there and deal with them, not when it's holding up the works.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was a big one. We're also experimenting with doing some things on like digitally for internal production. Because you know how like if you scan a card for external ordering, you can click add to cart. Yeah. Theoretically, and I don't mean theoretically, you can also do that now on stuff for internal ordering, and it pushes it to a different sheet that's sort of divided out by, whatever department or tool you kind of assign it to. Okay. I feel like sometimes digital things, as we've discussed at length, are not as good as physical. Yeah. So I'm not sure how it's going to work. And so we're just going to do it for 3D printing and printing, I think. Oh. Just to kind of see how that works. The nice thing about it for 3D printing is twofold. One, I often set off. We have bamboo. It's very convenient to just like be like, oh, I think we should run it overnight.
Yeah.
And so wherever I am, I can kind of see what needs to be run, download the part file, and then set it up and hit print. The other is that I normally run the 3D printer. Anyway, so we'll see how it goes.
Cool. On the subject of ARTA and Kanban cards in general,
yeah,
we were having an issue of most of us in the shop not interacting with ARTA on a daily basis because it's one person's job.
Okay.
And so not being super comfortable making cards.
Oh, yeah.
And so cards just weren't being made. So we just sort of made a standard shop practice that if you need something and you're busy or don't know how or don't want to make a card, you just write whatever the thing is on just a note card and put it in the drop bin.
Yep.
And whoever does the ordering,
we'll get it typed up.
We'll make it.
That's cool.
Find the product, make the card, etc., and get it ordered. Or even occasionally, we've just dropped the physical thing in the drop bin. That's clever.
So something I started doing
if it fits
a little while ago is also I added a bin for cards that need adjusting. And I'm not sure that was the move because stop and fix would say just like stop and fix.
Sure.
But I will say building
task
systems.
Switching and buffers is real.
Yeah, that's real. And then also being out of compliance with a system is so much worse than building in workarounds that are systemized. Like if people are just not updating cards and suddenly your cards are like out of date and none of them super work and have like that's so much worse than having some bin that is definitely a bad habit to drop stuff into, but also otherwise like those are sort of your options. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Jumping back in, we ordered a Renishaw BT30 master calibration gauge so that's like a gauge that's exactly a certain diameter and exactly a certain length for calibrating our tool setter and machine.
Okay.
We had one from a common vendor that there's some question about their reliability, accuracy. And we're still sorting out sort of long-term calibration methodology for our newest machine. Recently we had a tool get dropped on the lathe tool setter. It needs to be recalibrated. That requires a good gauge. So anyway,
on the lathe tool setter for that machine.
Yeah.
It's different than the.
Yeah. There's like two right next to each other.
Interesting.
So one that does height and one that can do radial.
Gotcha.
It actually does radial and height. I'm not sure why we need to, but someone who knows what they're talking about said we did.
And the two of them combined is cheaper than the laser?
Yep.
Gotcha.
By a significant margin.
Okay. Yeah, I looked at the laser because I thought it would be nice to be able to measure tool wear.
Yeah.
And I was like, or
not.
I could buy
more
Prius.
Tools. Yeah. Prius. That won't help you with your tool wear, but.
No. So.
Yeah, I guess jumping into why, I mean, I guess fairly obvious, but having reliable measurements or reliably accurate tools in the shop is key to our success. So it seemed like a small but annoying investment to make.
Totally. I think also a thing you kind of just dropped in passing that's very cool and has been really top of mind for me is like making procedures for all these things that are so critical, right? Like, I mean, especially like AS 9100 or like the
ISO 9001, AS 9100.
Yeah. All of those exist for a reason. And so even if you're not, right, like there's not certified, not even pursuing it, like that is the direction to move in. I think it is sort of thought of as a lot of paperwork and a lot of record keeping, which it is, but I think there is something extremely valuable, especially if you want to sell your company about, not especially if, for any company, the value is in the processes you can execute. And if they're documented, you can improve them and people can do. Anyway, it's just like, it's huge. And I'm really thinking a lot about that. I'm realizing that we release products. I think I've talked about this And every time we do it, we kind of reinvent the wheel on how we do it. But the set of tasks to release a product are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
In a sort of zoomed out way. Speaking of new products, I had to make a new assembly fixture because we had a new buckle that wouldn't work in our old assembly fixtures.
Oh, yeah.
In doing that, I kind of realized that I think I talked about this on the podcast, a universal sort of set of angles. And so that is live. Got it working using an Arduino, which one small step for it felt like a big deal to me, but I mean, the code is pretty basic, but in doing it, I realized the last time I used an Arduino was like 10 years ago, which it's kind of a long time.
I've never used one.
So I was debating between a PLC and an Arduino.
Yeah.
And I picked an Arduino. We'll see if it was a good move because it's really easy and approachable, and there's tons of code out there of how to do everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And maybe a PLC is the same way, but I wanted it to be easy for people to just kind of add more stuff to. Like, I don't know, why would you want this, but like we can connect it to Wi-Fi. You can just like do a lot of stuff.
I think PLC is good for people with experience in industry, and an Arduino is probably better if you're going to be hiring people who have zero industrial experience, but generally have grown up in the last 20 years.
Right.
I think you and I, well, speaking for myself, I'm an anomaly, I think, in that I have very little to no coding experience, but especially people 10 years my junior, that is almost always the other way around. And so I think people are going to be more familiar of that generation with it's like C++, right? Programming. Maybe.
I have no idea. I think so.
On an Arduino, or maybe you can put whatever you want on it. I don't know. Whereas like ladder logic on a PLC is makes sense to someone like me who comes from like a very mechanical background,
right,
and has done like industrial wiring, but to a kid, to anybody, to a kid would be like, why am I looking at these funny pictures and dragging around these icons that mean nothing to me?
I don't know. And I think now with a lot of PLCs you can just program.
That's possible.
But
right,
so maybe it was the wrong move.
Most PLCs do run like traditional programming now and just have like a graphical ladder logic interface on top of it. So that's correct.
Anyway, that is running. It works. The other reason I wanted to use that instead of just I was thinking at the beginning of just actuating it with essentially pneumatic logic.
Yeah.
Is adding feedback. If we want to detect the presence of a spring and the presence of a pin.
Yep.
And a bunch of other things of don't make bad buckles just because you can. So that's exciting to see it move and make buckles.
Nice. Gonna roll a couple here into one. Will made these indicator pucks for our setup carts,
which I think you posted on your story, right?
Posted on Instagram stories. Gonna be a little hard to explain, but imagine, so our setup carts have all these holes on the top that you can stick a tool taper through. So imagine just a grid of holes. And so he made these pucks. They are basically like if you took a top hat and punched the top out of it, and then you took another top hat and punched the top out of that, and then glued them together at the brim. That's sort of the shape.
Okay. And
then, so it's basically a ring with a flange.
Yeah.
One side is red and one side is green. And so we made an SOP and put scannable stickers on the carts. And so now what you do, because we had talked about this, if this is like number soup you're holding in your head when you're comparing what's in a machine.
So the challenge, just backing up a second, is switching over a machine from one setup to the next. There's some tools that won't need to be changed. There's others that are going to need to be changed.
Yes.
And you need to, do a compare function.
A compare function, also just making sure you get all the tools, regardless of what's in the machine, get all the tools that need to be in the machine for the next job in there. So what we're doing now, and it sounds a little bit like convoluted, but so far it's working pretty well. We're going to, update it, obviously.
Continuously?
Continuously. So you read through your list. You don't pay any attention to what's on the list. It's just like tool 7, you put a red puck in the 7. Tool 11, you put a red puck in 11. tool 14, you put a red puck in 14, et cetera, all the numbers. So all the holes that now need to be filled for that job have a puck.
Okay. And it's red.
You go to the machine, you do a compare. Tool 7 is the right number in the machine. If it is, you flip the puck to green.
Very cool.
If it's not, you leave it red. So after you're at the machine, you now have, generally speaking, a mix of red and green pucks. You go back to the tool station, you grab whatever built up tools are available that need to go in red pucks, and they go in. You fill any that you have to build, they go in, and now you have...
So does that mean that a tool taper in a red puck
Yes.
is ready to go in the machine?
Is ready to go in the machine.
Gotcha.
And then a green puck with no tool
is in the machine.
Is in the machine.
Okay.
Now you go to the machine and you... Oh, one update we made as well is that we are now pulling out any tools that are not used in that program out of the machine.
Okay.
Every machinist is probably screaming right now that this is terrible and you're doing a lot of extra work. But what we're finding is that it optimizes availability of tool holders because we share between machines. It also is looking forward to a point when maybe we create a digital compare, and that allows us to not have to track more than one job back, but only need to compare current running job and next running job to know what is in the machine. So far that's been good. So we now just go through the whole machine. We go to pocket 1. If it's not called for, pull it out. If it needs to be replaced, replace it. Put that in the hole where the red puck was. And now you put the red puck on top of the tool to indicate that it has not been set.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Go through the whole list. So now you end up with, hopefully, a bunch of green pucks still where there was tools in the machine.
Yeah.
A bunch of tools that were taken out of the machine with no pucks, and then some that were taken out of the machine with red pucks on top.
Yeah.
And then when you go to set tools, a red puck indicates...
Yeah. No. Sorry, that was unrelated.
This is getting very convoluted.
I gotcha.
A red puck indicates that it needs to be set.
Yep.
So you set it, and you flip it to green. And so when you're all done, you should have a bunch of green pucks sitting on your setup cart. Mm-hmm. And so far, it has been very... Although it sounds super convoluted here, it has reduced a lot of mental load and also has some pretty serious error proofing built in.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it sounds convoluted, but every operation sounds really easy to do. Right. Instead of it being hard to do the whole thing.
Yeah, each individual step is really simple.
One idea, unsolicited and not really thought through, is could you have your post... now that you're unloading unnecessary tools, what if you just touched off every tool that's called for in the program at the top of the...
Yeah, I think that's on the list.
Nice. Yeah. Secondly, my brother was in town and he's giving a talk on human factors in aviation. And one of the stories he has in there, which I thought was so crazy, apparently, I forget what type of airplane, got some maintenance done and then took, as he said, the wildest ride of its life, nearly crashing many times. It was like a big airplane. What had happened is they had changed the cables that controlled the ailerons, I want to say.
Okay.
Flappy bits on an airplane, for you aviation folks.
Critical surfaces.
Yeah. And when they put them back in, they had reversed them. And so now... Boy. And it had an autopilot system, which was trying to correct for that.
Oh my God.
And so the point was that human factors also extended to the people doing maintenance. And the manual was like, they could have done so many things in thinking through like, oh, if someone messes up this maintenance, that's going to be really bad. Like both cables were identical. There's no color coding. They could have added an end that only... like can only connect to the right one.
Poka-yoke. Yeah.
You could have the adjust the procedure where you only change out one at a time, right? So you can't flip them. In the pre-flight check, the it called for, doing I forget what it's called, but like with the stick, like full range of motion.
Okay.
And making sure that they moved. We don't
The
care
right
that they
way.
move. You want them to move the right way. And so updating that, like just so many aspects. But it's very like in aviation, it's very much about not crashing.
Yeah.
I think people who stay on the ground, kind of poorly underestimate the value of, this is not a hot take in automation circles or lean, but like poorly, estimate the cost of mishaps, right? And so like, yeah, there's a lot of added work that you're now adding to every changeover, pulling all the old tools out unnecessarily.
Sure.
But there's also just a tremendous amount of clarity and simplicity in your system now.
Yeah.
So you don't need, I mean, not that you don't want, but you don't need A players suddenly.
Right.
And also you don't want your A players doing dumb work with their brain.
Right. Yeah.
Like comparing fancy numbers and did I check that and was that one modified or is it whatever? It's just like, no.
Well, yeah. And like theoretically, like I'm one of the A+ players.
Yeah, you're the A-ist player.
And when I was doing this without these pucks, I got confused. And like I'm maybe above average in my ability to like check myself and like error proof
Before you wreck.
Yeah. And it was taking like all my capacity sometimes. Granted, I'm like we all deal with this, right? But
No, for sure. It's just it's a challenging task.
Right. Yeah. Number soup.
Yeah.
Not many people are good at number soup.
Something I've started noticing in like talking to different companies who are implementing ARDA.
Yeah.
The operators who are like really dyslexic are really systemized.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Because like you're sort of at a disadvantage. You're at such a disadvantage. You can't just do a bad thing like decently well, right?
Yeah,
Like have a terrible system and compensate with like your 10 trillion neurons, right?
Right.
Like
Well, interestingly too, this was not a thing for me in the past, but just in the last few years, I'm approaching 40. I have started to become dyslexic with numbers. And so it's taking more focus to not mix them up.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if this is the case, but like if I was really good at like, organizing stuff and spreadsheets and buying the right item and not like I bought like this exists, I promise. Fat-free half and half. Because it's like, bam, half and half, got it in the cart, right? And like I didn't read the rest because I don't really anyway, like that's a bummer, right?
That's the biggest bummer.
I wonder if I would have made ARDA because it wouldn't have been such a pain point, I think, if I was just better at shopping.
Sure.
Okay, we're sort of off track here. So speaking of ARDA, when you trigger a card for buying Sharpies, for example, you then click the add to cart button.
Yeah.
And it adds whatever you want to the cart. Well, we just launched tasks a while ago, which I think we mentioned on the pod, but is the same as a Kanban because like buying Sharpies is the same as like issuing an invoice or anything else.
Sure.
And so now the left button, so the same button, will open a link. And that link can be, so if you want to do invoicing for a particular job, the link can take you to, I don't know, like QuickBooks or
sure. Yeah.
So it'll open what you want
cool.
from that situation. So
Nice.
Tiny little thing is from talking to a machine shop up in Canada.
Huh.
He's like, does it do this? We were like,
not yet.
In 10 minutes it will. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm just going to bang through some of these because I got a list here.
Because I made so many improvements this week.
So many improvements, yeah. Because I kept my sheet open. I made a saw blade rack.
Okay.
We had not Kanban'd our saw blades,
Mm-hmm.
and we keep 4 different sizes on hand. They do wear out, especially if something goes wrong. They can wear out in a hurry, and they're like absolutely critical to every other process in the shop.
Right.
So it's kind of ridiculous that we hadn't Kanban them and we didn't have an easy, they were just kind of all in a box mixed up. So I made a rack that separates them out by sizes and you can easily
very nice.
just clip a Kanban card to the minimum quantity.
Mm-hmm.
And we made kanbans. So that was
nice.
That was a big win. People were very confused by us having so many different sizes.
And those are different like tooth
profiles, pitches.
Yeah.
Which if you read the literature, you should have a bunch of different sizes. Sounds like from everyone I talked to, most people just use one and just make it work. But I think it's probably different too if you're like saw some things versus if you're like a saw house that like saws material all day, every day. Probably pitch count starts to be really important. We found it to be really important for a larger material that we don't have too fine a pitch.
I think that's the only failure, because if you have an auto feeding saw, as long as you don't overfeed
you can
low
still
pitch.
overfeed a low pitch.
No, but I'm saying like you could have too rough of a blade on your saw and not really have issues as long as you don't overfeed it.
Yeah,
but if you have
a ball.
Yeah. But on the other end, you can't cut thicker material with a fine pitch and not run into like chip clearing issues, right?
Yeah. Chip clearing issues / like almost destroying, like wasting really expensive material from blade wander.
Oh, and so that's caused because the gullets fill, or what? Why does it start to wander?
That's caused because you're over
too much pressure.
Too much pressure for the beam strength of the blade.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Damn.
Which actually we finally dialed in our cutting parameters for hardened 17.4 and larger diameters this last week, because we were having that happen again. And I was like, I think this isn't
fascinating.
Just tooth pressure. This is also like, we are just running these things, I think, too hard. And it took forever to get through this material, but it cut it perfectly straight.
So one of my big, life outlooks is that everything, like when people talk about something being an art or requiring intuition, it just means they don't have a deep enough understanding of like enough parameters in the system. There's a book, I think I showed it to you. Oh, it's actually right. No, that's not it. Anyway, it's it has a full diagram of like cutting forces.
Oh.
And how a chip forms and all that. And if you just like, and sandpaper does it, saw blades do it, everything that's cutting ductile material does it. And just thinking about like the cutting force per tooth multiplied by the number of teeth in the cut, like you're either just going to be rubbing if you don't have enough pressure, or you're going to be just messing with the straightness of the blade. That's super cool. Yeah.
So that was cool. We added a programmed by selection in our standard setup sheet template now that Will is programming.
That bodes well.
Yes, it does bode well. And that the main, it's not a huge deal, but the failure mode there is there's an issue with a program that needs to be edited and someone comes and talks to me. And I don't know. I have no idea. So that just streamlines that, finding out that information. We added a saw yes, no toggle in our part programming, or in our for a part program. A while back we had talked about, we added a estimated saw cut length and then an actual saw cut length. There was still some ambiguity about whether that material actually needed to be sawn, whether it was could have been purchased pre-sawn, etc. So we added that. So when you're filling out a setup sheet, you just click that toggle. We talked about this last episode. We added picking a task to the Kamishi buy board review in the morning. We added indicator cards to the back of our programming board. I saw that. For when programs
also on Instagram
run dry, quote unquote. So in thinking through a pull system, if the chain breaks for some reason, the pull chain, there's not a good way usually to reconnect it without some sort of indicator from upstream in the chain.
Meaning the downstream process is now we're out of this thing. And so you need a way to be like, hey guys, we fixed our mistake.
We have the thing.
Gotcha.
Come get the thing.
Okay.
And so that was, there's a variety. One can be just programming going slow. Another reason can happen is if there are no programs to do because we don't have a work lined up for that machine, which is a real thing that happens sometimes. So that was just a simple note card with a green sticker on a red sticker on one side that faces the shop floor, so that the programmers can now indicate to the floor when there's programs prepared. That feels like a happy medium of the push versus pull information flow. In a perfect world, they'll always be green, but that's probably not realistic.
Right.
Updated our morning meeting template. Again, we've been kind of working through that, and it's starting to feel like it has a more consistent flow and is less just me talking at people. We were finding that the conversation naturally flowed towards like challenges, priorities early on in the conversation.
Okay.
Challenges and priorities for the day. And it had been later in the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of awkward. So we just moved that to the front where it was naturally happening.
Nice.
Now things seem to flow better. I bought a second laptop to keep at home, riding my bike again. And my laptop is very heavy.
Yeah.
And just seemed like silly I couldn't do some work the other day because I forgot it at work, just silly things. We got more sheet pan racks for adding clarity at our shipping or all post machining processes.
Cool.
Right now, you just kind of have to know where things are going.
Gotcha.
So plan is to have a rack for things that need to be laser engraved, a rack for things that need to ship to anodize, a rack for things that need assembly, a rack for things that are ready to ship to customer, and a separate rack that's over at the tumble and passivation anodizing station for that stuff. And we talked about this. Updated our tool change in the machine procedure.
Man, that's a bang in 2 weeks.
It was a good one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And with our SOPs for the machine setup and the cart setup, we made SOPs that are like legitimate actual SOPs that you can, with stickers, you can scan into. The stickers are at the carts and at the machine.
Very cool.
Hopefully they will be at least able to be referenced.
Yeah. And also updated.
Yeah. And we had a good conversation about like, this is going to suck. Let's just do it this way, at least for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll fix it. We'll get to a high level of refinement. Then if we start to have issues again in a month or 2 or 6 months, we can come back and review, see what we're not doing right or what balls got dropped or, whatever the case may be.
Interesting.
I don't anticipate everybody's going to scan this thing every day.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And why not just print it out and like laminate it? Just stick it there.
I don't think anyone would read it.
Gotcha.
I've done that in the past for smaller things like a point and call or like a...
Yeah. No, we have the same thing, and you stick it up, and the first 3 days you look at it, and then it's just like part of the background.
Yeah, exactly. So just be a waste of paper.
Fair enough.
And one more thing to just like reprint out if we actually do update it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Interesting.
Oh, what was it? There was a ARDA improvement that Will made.
Oh.
Shoot, I can't remember.
Not on the software side.
It's going to have to come back next episode once I recall.
Was it, well, I guess you don't know, but it wasn't in the software, I assume.
It had something to do with like some kind of little shortcut he was making.
Oh, cool. Well, maybe you'll remember.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks all for listening. You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. You can also find me at arda.cards on Instagram and online.
And you can find me at likenprecision.com, lichen_MFG on Instagram, and the pod at incremental CI. And we will talk to you soon.